Okay, so this is the motivational course, How to Be Negative. And this course was developed by me and the Negative Fish. We are exploring various negative topics, various themes that each month is dedicated to. And this month's topic is, the first month's topic is humor, dark humor. We are trying for whole months to comprehend it in a negative way. And the course consists of my paper that I write specifically for each month for this course, interviews with some notable thinkers that we're recording and sharing and talking to them. And also once per month, we gather for this kind of therapy research groups. The negative course will last for 13 months. It's possible to join it. It's never late to join and it's never late to leave it. You can also join it for 1 month, for example, if a topic is of particular interest to you. And at the end of the course, you will get, if you studied well enough, a diploma of sufficient motivation and the chance if you want to publish in the negative journal. So welcome to the research therapy group, the first meeting of the research therapy group of the negative course. And today I will begin by discussing essay that I wrote for this month. It's titled Humor and Depressive Realism, or Laughter as an Embodiment of the Death Drive. And after discussing it, we'll proceed to discussion and various weird exercises. So the main idea of the course was already something that Fish said, that our main probably thought of this month is that there is something in laughter, in comedy, in humor, that it's dark and that it's about suffering and not that much about enjoyment the way we would normally comprehend. We would normally comprehend humor and laughter. Because normally, according to common sense, when you ask anyone, except for you, because you already know, that's why I'm not asking you. If you ask anyone with more or less positive perspective, where would they locate humor? On the dark side of life here, or on as something positive on the bright side of life? Or do they associate it with the suffering that is here, death, and negative things? Or do they associate it with positive, like enjoyment and relief? And normally it is thought to be located here, comprehended as relief or associated with enjoyment. And what I was trying to do is to present the negative comprehension of a humor, and including comprehension of depressive realism with humor and comedy at the center, because even pessimistic comprehension of human being that discusses humor, like Schopenhauer or Nietzsche, to the extent that Nietzsche can be seen as depressive realist. So those thinkers who comprehend, who thinks that human existence is something tragic, and if they discuss also laughter and humor, they would see it as something secondary. They would still see it on this positive side. For Nietzsche, for example, who would claim that human being is a tragic, most suffering creature, and he would also say that is the only creature who laughs. But it's like, in this perspective, it's not that Nietzsche is defining human being as someone who laughs and it coincides with suffering. It's rather that he sees the laughter as compensation. It's still here. It's still not at the center of his, to the extent that Nietzsche is dark thinker. It's not at the center. It's not the essence of this darkness. And similar Schopenhauer, who is known for his tragic comprehension of human existence, he would talk about comedy, but also more like not the center, something secondary, so it's still here. And I was wondering if it's possible to overthrow the perspective of depressive realism, where the humor or the laughter is going to be at the heart of a human being and not associated with the something bright, but it's actually darkness. Simon Critchley, who is very useful to this discussion, he has this beautiful quote talking about, in his book on humor, talking about the dark heart of humor and seeing the black sun of depression shining within the universe, like being essence of the humor. So if you dig deep into humor, if you hit the bottom of the humor, you see depression, you see suffering within it, and this is what is truly essence of black humor. But unfortunately, Critchley doesn't develop this specific beautiful thought, so me and Fish would have to do it for him. So according to this perspective, to this switch perspective, the ha 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 is actually here. It's at the dark essence of existence. It's actually manifestation of suffering and not manifestation of relief from suffering. And rather, we would say that claiming that humor is here would be kind of protective mechanism of facing what humor actually opens up. That is actually raw depression or raw pain, or kind of seeing it on a bright side, or seen as relief would be just alibi, for example, for recognizing, instead of recognizing what humor is truly is, and seeing the pain of humor. But Simon Critchley has another very useful thought when he talks in his paper on comedy and finitude, presents the idea that only comedy is truly tragic, and tragedy in itself is not tragic enough. So comedy is actual tragedy. Like he presents us with this switch of perspective that I'm looking for. There is something in tragedy, he claims, and he specifically talks about German intellectual tradition, including Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, and Heidegger, who, for him, and it's kind of obvious that they represent this tragic stance in facing human finitude, meaning that the tragic recognition of the tragic side of human existence, or the tragic hero, the way Simon Critchley talks about the subject of this German tragic intellectual tradition. It's the subject who is suffering, who's supposed to suffer, and it's still, there is a compensation in a way in this suffering through the very position of the tragic hero. It's a heroic position. For example, in Schopenhauer, you recognize the finitude and the tragedy of your existence in the finitude of your existence. And this makes you authentic subject, authentic Dasein, authentic, in authentic way embrace your existence. And this kind of authenticity, or anything tragic, being a tragic hero, gives you at the same time, in a way, compensation or consolation for the very tragedy of your existence. So in tragedy, it's not tragic enough because it gives you something positive, some kind of compensation for who you are, either for the suffering you're going through. Either it's in a form of, well done, your existence is now authentic, or well done, you're now a hero, a tragic hero. And it gives you a certain sense of significance, or like ethical position of dignity, and gives sense of purpose to your suffering, or some kind of feeling of grandiose something. So for Simon Critchley, it's actually comic position, the opposite position of inauthenticity, and comic hero, or rather anti-hero, not hero, that is truly tragic because you get nothing in return. It's truly pathetic position. There is no compensation, there is no consolation, no dignity in a position of anti-comic, anti-hero, with the absence of authenticity. In this way, the comic stance is actually tragic stance. And we can say in a similar way about depressive realism, that it still gives you something positive, some kind of value in the depression itself, that it's as more realistic, it entails more realistic comprehension of the world. So it gives you something, you're better person, for example, if you're depressed. And the truly depressive realism would be without, like, the position of rather comedy, without getting anything back from your suffering in the form of depression. And so this is how one can substitute tragedy with comedy, seeing comedy as actual tragedy, and tragedy as not tragic enough in itself. Other useful thinker who we were talking with and whose chapter from his first book we were reading is Alfie Baun, who is particularly useful in his discussion of anxiety, because unlike normally laughter and comedy is seen as a relief from anxiety on the bright side. Alfie claims that it is rather the opposite. It might be rather tricky. It might be rather playing a trick. It promises to reduce anxiety, but through bringing through laughing, we actually bring anxiety back because. And another great thing about Alfie Baun is that he uses the comprehension of the subject, psychoanalytic comprehension of the subject that shows that subject is structured around the lack or the loss. And for him, laughter would be, or comedy or humor would be exposing this lack, exposing a loss, and through this it brings anxiety. So laughter is something anxious, and it's not relief from anxiety. It's rather a way of dealing with anxiety, but it's also, first of all, it's the signal of anxiety. It is, laughter is, in this comprehension, anxious thing. And whoever talks about psychoanalytic comprehension of laughter, or most philosophers, they would like this theory of laughter, the incongruity theory of laughter. And it's particularly great because it matches well with this comprehension of a subject as constituted around the lack, the absence of themselves. And because from this position, the laughter arises when there is gap, some kind of rupture, incongruity between what we anticipate and what actually happens. There is some non-coincidence that makes us laugh. And this non-coincidence, it works great with the psychoanalytic concept of rupture and psychoanalytic concept of lack, which is the similar thing to rupture, which comprehends subject as constituted around the lack. So as you probably know, I do explain everything with those lines and those two sticks. Everything, and I mean everything. Like, this is at the same time the scheme for the subject, because subject is constituted around the lack, and this is the lack, the nothing that constitutes subject. So S might be for subject, the same subject, and there is the rupture, the absence of the subject at the heart of the subject that constitutes subject. So S and S might stand for one subject. S and S might stand also for different subjects. In this sense, it would be a scheme for how social bond works, that there is lack, rupture, which we feel through trauma and anxiety in our social bond, and it constitutes our social bond. This is also a scheme for death drive, so literally for everything. The scheme for death drive, like repetition compulsion, so this absence, this is the rupture and the lack that constitutes the sticks, the lines. It represents death drive in a way that Todd McGowan, for example, defines it as a repetition of the structural and traumatic lack, or repetition compulsion of the repetition of this lack, of the absence that constitutes the rhythm of subject's existence. And laughter as the death drive comprehended, laughter comprehended through the theory of incongruity, would be revealing, like touching this lack within ourselves, and laughing as a result of, so it's something traumatic and anxious, of laughter as a result of being exposed to the lack at the core of, as the structural core of ourselves, or the structural core of reality. And in this way, one can say that the work of the death drive, which I see as, and it's usual in psychoanalysis to see it as the core drive, it just interpretation is of death drive is different. So the main drive of the subject is death drive. it normally seen the work of the death drive as constitutive main drive of subject existence would be normally seen as tragic because it's painful, because we go through these ruptures with ourselves, and in existential terms, we're touching the core of who we are, the absence of ourself, or some kind of absurdities that we face, and that where we expect a meaning or expect some certain sense, we never find it. So it's painful. The existence is painful, and the rhythm of the work of the death drive is normally seen as tragic. But I would claim that it's rather comic. So this repetition of the luck is seen as tragic, but I would rather see it as comic, because the tragic means that in some way this luck is still covered. Following Critchley's logic, it's still, there is something there, like the meaning or the sense of purpose in tragic position, in position of a tragic hero, while it actually more there's more acceptance of there is more acceptance of the luck in the comic position, following the Simon Critchley logic. It's just more pure, in a more pure way, being exposed to the luck within ourselves without covering with any purpose, meaning, or something grandiose. And remembering that laughter is bodily reaction, we can say that in the ha 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 itself might be seen as repetition compulsion, and it's meaningless since it's not a relief. It's meaningless bodily reaction, and it's also self-destructive. It's annihilation of self in a way, because it's, when we laugh, we are not in control of ourselves. So the ha 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 can be seen as the actual bodily manifestation of the death drive in a form of repetition compulsion. It doesn't make sense. It might be seen as the sound of pain. We're not, the self is lost. We're not we're not in control of ourselves. We're kind of glitching. The ha 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 is our glitching, and this we becoming, the death drive manifests itself through ourselves, our body. The self is lost. So it's kind of the glitching of the body that coincides with the ontological, maybe even glitching of the world, how world is absurd and painful, and laughing at itself through us. So the bodily manifestation of repetition compulsion, it's meaningless, meaning it's compulsive repetition at the heart of our living, which is also at the same time dying. The glitch of the body that mirrors the glitch of the universe itself. It's the loss of self-control and dissolution of oneself. And humor at its core can be seen as self-annihilative. It's against the self. It's where self is not in control. It also disillusion of the illusion of self. Also, Simon Critchley claims that the authentic humor is, first of all, laughing at oneself, not meaning exposing one's own luck, not only luck or some kind of deficiency in others. So laughing, which means in my interpretation at least, that humor has to be self-destructive. Otherwise, it's not real humor. You have to start with exposing your luck, and through this exposing nothing within you, you share nothingness with others. So we can claim that humor has the potential of connecting, of creating certain type of solidarity. Since it's self-destructive act, we start with ourselves, and this is how death drive manifests itself through laughter, exposing oneself as nothing. And this nothing is also at the core of relationship with others, the social bond, genuine relationship with other, nothing that we hold in common. So it creates, and laughter as a bodily phenomena is also contagious. So this, when you go ha 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 and someone else replies with ha ha ha, we can see it as the instance of sharing nothingness, we glitching together and embodying the death drive together, meaninglessness glitching in a form of ha ha ha. All right, so this was my presentation of this essay. There is another, I know there is another part of the essay where I'm discussing dark humor. That's the one with the trigger warning, and that the final part of the text where I wrote actually included it because I wrote it and because I thought actually contradict myself there, and I thought it would be dishonest not to include it, but I would actually prefer not to discuss it, and to be honest, I would prefer no one to read it too. But okay, that was me talking about my essay, and now we can proceed to group discussion and some uh, negative exercise. I will stop recording it, and if you have any questions, you can ask. Waiting for me to stop recording it.